massive edition of VFL 23. This is episode 3. My name's Chris Yendy and I have the pleasure of being joined by the voice of VFL football, the great man, Brendan Jonty Rhodes. Rhodesy, footy's back, mate, and back with a vengeance on the weekend.
It is, and fantastic to see him finally playing some football, albeit only practice matches, but rivalry round practice matches, you could say, with the arch rivals taking on each other in all 5 games, and there was some pretty good footy played too, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It's just great action across the men's and women's, and I love the tack on too, mate, with the AFL. We saw 6 to 8 quarters across quite a few games across the weekend, and we got to see some of the VFL players actually run around with the AFL players, depending on how the structures went for the various teams.
Yeah, for sure, especially that game back on Friday night, which was interesting because it was originally scheduled as 2 separate games between Geelong and Hawthorn, and then Geelong and Box Hill. But then they merged it together into an 8-period game, which, of course, those people who are watching it saw a final score of 220 to 133 and must be wondering what happened. Not much defence in that. But the way it turned out was basically the VFL players all played in the second half of that match anyway in the last 4 quarters. So there was a separate scoreboard kept at the very least by the Box Hill Hawks side of things. And in the end, that was probably the best game of the round. As I said, it looks like Geelong's had a massive win, but they did all of that in the AFL portion of the game. So the final score from the VFL contest was 10-22-82 for Geelong over Box Hill Hawks 11-14-80. So just a 2-point result there in favour of the Cats, and they actually came from 24 points down at 3-quarter time to get that result, Geelong. So Box Hill would be reasonably happy with what they've done there, travelling down to the Cattery and in their first practice match and having a reasonable result.
Yeah, well, of course, Box Hill are coming into the season after making the finals last year, and they're missing a notable player in the form of Fergus Green, who had an outstanding season for the Hawks last year, and now he's gone onto the senior list. So they really have to start to, I guess, find that key body up forward that's going to be a key force for them this year.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Really, they did have Emerson Jecker alongside him, alongside Fergus Green last year. He went down into defence later on in the season and did really well, and I think ended up making his way into the Hawthorn team in defence later on in the season. Whether Fergus Green makes the Hawthorn team, you would expect that he'll probably get opportunities early with the Hawks in a full rebuild. So I still expect we'll probably see a little bit of him at Box Hill City Oval as he tries to find his way back at the top level in his second chance after playing a handful of games for the Western Bulldogs. Jecker, you'd think, might go into the forward line. They've still got Benny Cavara down there who came third in the league goal kicking, of course, last year. And those guys are going to have fellas like Callum Brown and Patrick Naish ramming the ball down their throat. Say hello, Festa. There she is on the wall, and there she is saying hello to you. So it'll be interesting to see how badly the Hawks are affected by the big reset that's happened at AFL level. You'd think that's going to weaken the Box Hill side, but they seem to have recruited pretty well in their VFL list. So I don't think they'll drop off too much.
And we know they took on a superstar Geelong outfit that is, I think, across the board, from coast to coast, so to speak. They're strong at the top at AFL. They've got a strong VFL side. Their VFLW side has had one of the best well-run programs in a long time. The AFLW side is building along very nicely. They took on a quality side over at the Cattery, and I guess the Cats, they'll be looking to atone for some bad kicking in that last quarter, but to run away thrilling winners by 2 points. A lot of good things to like about their efforts. And I do want to...
yeah, definitely.
They did bring in a good Oscar Forkhead from the Gold Coast Suns, who I noticed he's jumped onto their list, and I saw Oscar a fair bit last year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can bring to the Geelong side this year.
Interesting one. Isn't Forkhead still at still at the Suns?
No, I noticed he's on the VFL list.
They brought in Oscar Murdoch and Oscar Riccardi. So it'd be interesting to check that out. He was actually, Oscar Forkhead was actually drafted out of the Geelong VFL team in the mid-season draft to the Suns. So that's probably your confusion right there. He played for the Cats in the first half of last year before heading to Queensland. But yeah, he looks like a decent player, and yeah, I'm sure he'll get his opportunities wherever he is. I'm pretty sure he's still up at Heritage Bank Arena, I think it's now known as.
Yeah. Well, either way, I'm excited to see what he can deliver. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the podcast on the fly. I'm talking. This is why I'm talking to the voice of VFL. If I make any slip ups, Rhodes's all across it, as he would be across the fact that Collingwood had a big loss last week, and as an Essendon fan, as you can see up there, for those who are listening in, I've got an Essendon jumper there. Just a thrill to see Carlton just crunch them by 70-odd points, or nearly 70 points on the weekend. And to see Carlton, they're really flexing their muscles against the Collingwood outfit that will achieve some good things in 2023.
A very interesting result, this one. I know it's only a practice match, but Carlton actually were the team that was basically cooked last year towards the end of the season in the VFL, and they beat Collingwood in the last round to sneak into the 8, and then they beat them again at Victoria Park in the first week of the finals, and that sort of got them through to a semi-final where they nearly upset the Brisbane Lions up there at Red Rooster Park. They've certainly started well in this game, even without their star forward in Ben Crocker, who didn't play in the game. But the Blues 16-10, 106 over Collingwood 5-7-37. That's the only one-sided game that we saw on the weekend. And yeah, obviously a month out from the start of the season, you don't read too much into it.
No.
But yeah, I'm sure Collingwood and Josh Fraser will be looking to build a little bit more from that to be more ready to go for round one.
Exactly. I don't think, as you said, there's not too much to be concerned about. We know the senior team as well. They're still trying to develop their list and work out what they want to do. It's purely for practice match reasons. We just want to see where they're at. And I know the result was the same in the ones, but nothing like seeing a good old Carlton-Collingwood rivalry. Your mob, the Swans, had a pretty solid win against Brisbane Lions in testing conditions over in Sydney. What did you read of the game? Over just the 3 periods, I think they played, was it 6 quarters across both games?
No, they played a full 4-quarter game in the AFL and then just the 3 in the VFL. So they played 7 altogether. And yeah, it was interesting that they only had the 3. I think that there are actually some issues with injuries at the Swans at the moment. So they're a little bit down on troops right now, a month out from the start of the VFL season, or 3 weeks out from the start of the VFL season, 2 weeks out from the start of the AFL. And in fact, they've cancelled their practice match on Friday afternoon against Carlton, which was supposed to be a curtain raiser to the AFL game on Friday night. So the Swans having a little bit of a problem with numbers at the moment, but there were some strong names fronting up in the best players for the Swans. All the top 3, apart from Jacob Constanti, the next 3 draft picks, Owen, Mitchell and Vickery, all appeared in the best players for Sydney. A young VFL signing by the name of Howard, he was named best on ground. Harry Morrison, he's a very underrated player in the Swans VFL forward line. Had a good game as well, and a young famous name of Indy Kirk.
Oh,
and Indy Kirk performed very well, from what I'm told, for the Swans team there. The son of the great Brett, and Tom Longmire, the son of Horse, also showed some reasonable signs in the game. So we'll look forward to seeing if those two can get some regular games this year. Indy played, I think, one late last year in the VFL as a late inclusion, and Tom was an emergency a couple of times without breaking in. So hopefully they'll do well. For the Lions, the brothers, I suppose, of the AFL players that they've brought in performed pretty well. Lockie Rayner, who's come up from Essendon, he came under notice. Blake Coleman, the brother of Kadean Coleman, and I believe Kyle Dunkley had a run around as well, the brother of Josh, who was important in the AFL game. But the Swans, they just got a little bit stronger as the game went on, despite being short on troops. They got some run into the legs of Hayden McLean and Nick Blakey, who's coming back from glandular fever, which was good to see. So a solid hit out that I think both teams got enough out of, with Sydney winning 9-6-60 to Brisbane Lions 6-7-43.
Yeah, good. I mean, you read what you do into pre-season games, but I think it's a good feather in the cap of the Swans against a Brisbane Lions team that they finished the preliminary final last year, and to be honest, I expect them to be in the same sort of position again this year, given the depth that they've added with Kyle Dunkley and then Rayner. I'll go through these last couple of games for the men's pretty quickly, but a big shout out to the Northern Bull Ants, having a strong win over Coburg by 11 points. We know the Bull Ants, they're a club that's just improving and looking to really develop and get some good performances under their belt. Just exciting to see them get a good confidence-boosting win over Coburg and really set themselves up for the year.
Yeah, practice match or not, the Battle of Bell Street always seems to turn it on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the sixth period game they played out at Bundoora, and there was nothing between them all day. Level at quarter time, a point up the Bull Ants at half time. I think it was 3 points to the Lions after 3, 2 points to the Bull Ants after 4, and then they got away in the third quarter with 3-2 and then held on. There was only 1 point kicked by either team in the last quarter, in the sixth period as the teams tired out. Bull Ants 11-10-76 beating Coburg 10-5-65. Tom Stapleton, the recruit from South Australia, kicked a couple of goals. Sardell Hawley, a fella who's crossed from Werribee, he's a small forward midfielder. He was their best player. Ben Hurley broke in. Liam Mackey, who's just been announced as a co-captain last week of the Bull Ants, he was up there in the best as well. For Coburg, Josh Watson, Tom Jepson, Nathan Boucher, Luke Nelson, and Jesse Corigliano. Some of the regular names you'd think appearing there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go in standalone Saturday, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Williamstown 10-6-66 defeated Port Melbourne 7-8-50. Just I love seeing these teams go toe to toe. The history that is very much rich and deep, more so than a lot of AFL teams. Practice match nonetheless, but geez, a good performance by both teams on the day.
Yeah, no question. And the best story out of this one is Connor Waitman, who was delisted by the North Melbourne VFL team at the end of last year, has been training with Williamstown over summer in the hope of securing a contract. You saw on the Seagulls Twitter feed last week that it was announced that he'd actually secured that, and then he went out and got best on ground. That's a fantastic story for him. Marty Hoare, one of their star recruits, appeared prominently as well. Corey Preston, Tom Downey, the best and fairest winner. The returning Nick Ebinger stood out as well, as did Mitch Cox, who I think was unlucky not to still be on the Brisbane Lions list after fighting so hard to get an opportunity. For Port Melbourne, they're one of their star recruits in Fraser Rosman, who was the hard luck story of last year's grand final when he did his hammy in the prelim for Casey Demons. He was their best player, and Campbell Walker, a former Queenslander, I believe, a former Brisbane Lion. Mm-hmm. He was very prominent as well. But a 16-point win to Williamstown, and once again, practice match or not, it's I'm sure everyone down at Seagull Land's walking a little bit taller this week.
Most definitely right. We also we saw some women's teams in action as well. One of the scores that stood out for me across the weekend in the VFLW, Carlton 9-7-61 defeating Port Melbourne 3-1-19. It's good to see the Blue Bag is starting to build some confidence and momentum heading into season 2023, and Port Melbourne they are successful in their own right, and I think they'll take a fair bit out of that match.
They dominated this game pretty much from the start. Carlton kicked 5-2 in the first quarter. Never really looked back. Port Melbourne managed just the one behind across the middle two terms. and the 1 goal in the last quarter as Carlton won by 7 goals quite comfortable. They've recruited very nicely from other clubs, the Blues, which we'll get to also a little bit later on in the show. Amia Cowan kicked 3 goals. Esther Honeybun kicked a couple. And their best player from last year, the best couple of players from last year, Millie Klingbeil and Ali Bild were right up there again in the best players for Carlton. Unfortunately, haven't been able to secure any details for Port Melbourne fans on who went well for the borough, but keep an eye out. Once I do that, we'll be appearing up on vfl.com.au.
Absolutely, where you can get all the latest updates and all the news around the VFL. And we'd like to extend appreciation for everyone that's been supporting us over the last couple of weeks. Make sure you can join us on Spotify. You can catch us on Anchor. We're on Amazon Music. Jump on YouTube. Just type in VFL 23 and you'll be able to get either the video version or the audio version of this show. Some of the other news that's come across the desk over the past few days, something that I'm really excited about, but almost a hard luck story in some way too, Rhodesy, and I'm be interested to hear your thoughts. Quinton Narkle has joined the Bombers VFL squad after missing out at Richmond, but as we heard earlier on in the week, with the sudden retirement of George Castagna, or Jason Castagna from Richmond, there was another spot that opened up, but unfortunately they have to wait to the mid-season draft. And we know Narkle just missed out to, I think it was a Bradkey last week. What are your thoughts about that situation?
Well, from all the kudos that have been coming out of Richmond for Jason Castagna, and he did have a wonderful career, retiring at 26 with 3 premierships to his name. You cannot criticise that, but I'm sure, and they won't say it publicly, but I'm sure the Tigers will be wishing he'd made the decision 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So that they could have put Quinton Narkle on, but it's actually it was reported on the weekend that he was going to join Essendon. Quinton Narkle. The Bombers have actually made that official late this afternoon. Officially announced that Quinton Narkle is a big fish signing for the team at the NEC hangar. I can't say Windy Hill because they haven't been scheduled to play any games at Windy Hill in the first 15 rounds. There must be some works coming at Windy Hill, some redevelopment works coming up. So they've been scheduled to play all their games at the hangar in the first 14 weeks of the season, which will be something a little bit different. And we'll see a new look Windy Hill because fantastic work by the groundsman there. Don't take anything away from this. That ground was underwater through the Melbourne floods early in the year. It was completely destroyed. And in the last week, it's been announced as the host venue for the Victorian Premier Cricket First Grade Grand Final. So how fantastic is that for the curators, the ground staff out at Windy Hill, that they've been able to get it back up to a level where they've been playing Victorian second 11 games there, and now the grand final's going to be there as well. So well done to them.
No, it's simply fantastic. Well done to the curators there, and who knows, hopefully we can see some games move across to Windy Hill in the back end of the season as we gear up for a big finals campaign, which is a long, long way away. A couple of other news to come across the desk. Trent Manell and Will Fordham are captains of Frankston. North Melbourne had held its VFL launch over the weekend, or VFLW launch, with Jess Jones named as the captain. Is she still on Carlton's AFLW list, or is she no longer on that list?
I believe she is. She was drafted just for season 7, taken in just for season 7. Didn't manage a game for the Blues but has returned to North Melbourne now and has been named captain. She went from North Melbourne to Carlton for that season. Hasn't actually missed a game for North Melbourne because of the split seasons and that sort of thing. So she's back there, and that's a very, very nice result for her. Her loyalty to return straight back to where she's played a fair bit of footy, both for them and I believe Melbourne University, as well as the precursor to the Kangaroos.
Yeah, it works out well for Jess because she had the opportunity to be exposed around the AFLW system for that full season. So to be able to bring some things back from that experience and showcase her leadership there, it's going to be invaluable for the North Melbourne VFLW side in season 2023.
Yeah, definitely. And the Roos, they've announced some pretty handy recruits as well. I believe the best one you're going to catch me on the hop now. I've actually started talking about something, and then I've gone and forgotten who it was. Player has come across from Geelong to the Kangaroos by the name of Madison Maguire. 10 AFLW games, 56 VFLW games for the Cats. So she played in that, or she would have played in that grand final if it was played in 2021. So she's a big inclusion for North Melbourne. And they've also brought across Annabelle Scott. Played for North Melbourne last year after crossing from the Bulldogs. Brought up her 50th game, so she'll be better for that experience. And I look forward to seeing North Melbourne push up and potentially make the finals for the first time.
Absolutely. It's exciting times if you are a North Melbourne VFLW fan. We know there are plenty of them out there. Another one that sort of probably hits a little bit closer to my new home, being here in southeast Queensland, but I'm excited. Charlotte Hammonds has joined the VFLW Hawks team. Charlotte was involved in the first few games that I called in the QAFLW up here in Queensland when she lined up for Bond University. And Bond Uni they've been the powerhouse of the QAFLW competition for many years without enduring and celebrating the ultimate success. Charlotte is also part of the she used to be with Carlton in the AFLW. I think she's going to add a fair bit of quality to this Hawks lineup.
Yeah, and it's terrific to see that Box Hill have decided to, I suppose, broaden the web, look a little bit wider for their recruits and give opportunities. Obviously, Charlotte Hammonds, as you said, has been an AFL-listed player, has played some AFLW football, I believe. So she's going to be a terrific inclusion. But they've also stretched their talons into Sydney too this week, the Hawks, and they've picked up a 26-year-old defender out of Sydney University by the name of Bella Gray. To be honest, I'm sorry, Bella. Haven't really had the chance to do the research yet, but that is definitely coming. But bringing players in from interstate and giving them their opportunities to play VFLW football and push for AFLW contracts, that's what it's all about, and it's great to see. So well done to her, well done to Charlotte Hammonds, and hopefully they can put their best foot forward and maybe get a chance to play for Hawthorn in season 8.
Absolutely, and this goes back to a discussion that we had on the last edition about the expansion of the VFLW competition and whether we'll see a similar sort of expansion what we've seen with the VFL program itself, where we see more AFL-based teams actually having more teams into the VFLW. So this enables players from Sydney to get that experience, which you highlighted last week in the VFLW program. It's going to build them up. We're talking about all the academy works that's happening around the east coast of Australia. I think it's really going to add a lot more strength, durability and depth to the VFLW, but also help prepare players for their quest to play AFLW in a strong competition in the VFLW.
Yeah, exactly right. And it would be good to see more. The first step that I'd like to see happen is them to play more games. They play back at VWFL in the early couple of years of VFLW. They did play their full 18-game season. I understand why it was shortened. It was to sort of give a gap between the AFLW and VFLW seasons. But a lot of the AFLW players now don't play a lot of VFLW football. So I'd be quite happy to see them go back to a full 18-round season and play more teams twice. At the moment, they only play 3 teams twice. So 14 games is actually quite a short season. So fingers crossed that's the first step. They can start playing more games. That'll give more players the opportunity to play if there's players being rested and that sort of thing. And then they can move forward further and have some potentially new clubs coming in.
Coming up a little bit later on, we are going to dissect some of the teams ahead of the VFLW season, which isn't too far away. Mate, let's gear up for this weekend in VFL and VFLW practice match action after we had a nice taste of it on the weekend. It's going to get better with Super Saturday over at Craigieburn, mate. I know you have been so pumped about this one. I've booked out the whole Saturday myself. I'm going to jump on Clutch and I'm going to watch this festival of football. Mate, break it down. What is happening at Craigieburn on Saturday in the VFL?
Yeah, VFA standalone Saturday. How fantastic. And that's what all the old-time supporters are calling it. Officially, it's called the VFL Pre-Season Carnival. But yeah, all the old VFA fans are jumping up and down with delight at this schedule, which is fantastic that all 6 VFL Melbourne-based standalone teams are going to be playing on the same ground on the same day with free entry at Craigieburn at Highgate Reserve, the former Rams Arena. So if you're in Melbourne and you're not having something else on, get out there and enjoy some fantastic football. 7 hours, I believe it will be of football. If you're not here in Melbourne or you can't get there, do exactly what you're going to do, Yendi, and log on to clutch.tv /AFL-sports /VFL /preseason-carnival. That link will be appearing through the VFL website, through the team's articles and the practice match article that's up there at the moment as well. So you'll be able to find it there if you didn't get it written down when I read it too quickly.
For those watching it, I'll chuck it up on the screen and I'll run it through our links as well, because it is going to be must-see viewing. So we got Northern Bull Ants kicking off at 10:45. They take on Williamstown at 1 p.m, Frankston and Werribee, and then at 3:15 p.m, Coburg and Port Melbourne. And for me, living in Queensland, it's great because I can kick back at 9:45 and just enjoy it, and then I'll have time to go out and indulge myself in some of the other activities, probably watching some more football later on in the night. VFLW action.
Right. And that is, as you said, they are Melbourne time. So 9:45 start up in Queensland, and obviously make the same, I suppose, alterations if you want to watch from South Australia or Western Australia for the daylight savings times and everything there. But yeah, it should be a cracking day. Hopefully, as I've said last week, they can make it a regular occurrence and really turn it into something big in the pre-season.
Mate, what other big practice matches have we got happening in the VFL this weekend?
It is a big weekend of VFL practice matches, 9 games in total, in fact. We've, of course, mentioned standalone Saturday up at Craigieburn, but a lot of teams lining up this weekend, and it all starts once again on Thursday night. And that's at the AIA Centre at Olympic Park. Collingwood versus the Box Hill Hawks. So the Hawks fronting on a Thursday for the second week in a row. That match is a 4x25-minute quarter game at 7 p.m. So get down there after work on Thursday, Collingwood and the Hawks fans, and catch a look at your teams up close and personal. On Friday morning, I'm not sure we'll get too huge a crowd to this one at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning, but it's a 4x15-minute hit out between Essendon and Sandringham. So if you're around Tullamarine and you've got an hour or so to spare, you can call in and take a look at that one. The Brisbane Lions are taking on Southport, the first hit out for the Sharks this season. That game is at Brighton Homes Arena in Springfield, 7 o'clock on Friday night, 4x25-minute quarters there. So that should be a good one. The first taste of football in Queensland for you guys up there, Yandy?
Yeah, well, at least in the VFL space, I wish I was able to get along to the one on Friday night. I'm getting a little bit of a taste of what Springfield's all about on Thursday night, so I'll have to report back next week. But it's going to be exciting because it's not the only time we're going to be seeing the Lions and the Sharks go head to head over this practice match period.
Yeah, exactly. They do have another one at Fankhauser Reserve in week 4. So there's a couple matches that are like that double up the meetings, which we'll get to shortly. Sydney and Carlton, as I mentioned earlier, their game on Friday afternoon has been cancelled. So Swans and Blues fans in Sydney that are heading to Blacktown International Sports Park for the AFL practice match on Friday night don't need to head out there earlier because the VFL game is not happening. On Saturday, there's another 6 games taking place. As we said, the 3 at Craigieburn. Back at Blacktown again. You could stay the night at Blacktown and front up for the AFL doubleheader there on Saturday. GWS is playing Gold Coast from 9 a.m. in the VFL, and I think 12 o'clock is the AFL game there. So an VFL AFL double header. Casey Demons, we'll see them for the first time. They're playing Richmond. Again, a first look at the Tigers. They're playing at Casey Fields in an AFL curtain raiser at 12 o'clock before Melbourne play the Tigers out there at 4 o'clock, I think, on Saturday afternoon. So get out there early and see the VFL teams in action. And, of course, Footscray versus North Melbourne. They will lock horns in an AFL curtain closer at Icon Park. So the Bulldogs are playing North Melbourne in the AFL at 1:10. Hang around there, Bulldogs and Roos fans, because there is a VFL game at 4 p.m. following that. So that's the full round of games that are taking place. That one has been added to the fixture since last week. So that one's taking off, and they will play again. Those two teams will play again at Arden Street later on in the pre-season as well. Just before we wrap up our talk about the VFL and move back onto the women, Yendi, sending a big cheerio to Eli Templeton from Port Melbourne, who has today announced that he's stepping away from football for this year as he continues to recover from that horrible head knock playing in the local footy last year when he sadly flew over the fence and landed on his head. Which was horrible to see footage of, and we haven't seen him since. We certainly send him all the best and hope to see him in Port Melbourne colours again in 2024.
Absolutely, fingers crossed. We wish him all the best on a speedy recovery, and it goes to show, well, football is just something we can enjoy, and it's much bigger than life itself. Some big practice matches coming up in the VFLW, mate. Starting off, I think Saturday, we've got Geelong and Williamstown over at Deakin University.
Yeah, another chance for supporters down in Geelong to see some football this weekend. The first look at it for both these two teams. That's at 11 o'clock on Saturday at Deakin University in Warren Ponds, the Cats and the Seagulls. New look Seagulls, of course, with a few Swans players in their side. Interesting to see if they line up this soon. And then the second game on Saturday is at Arden Street, another one for Kangaroo supporters. If you can't get across and watch the men at Icon Park, the women are playing Collingwood at 1 o'clock in a 4x18-minute game. So you could go and watch the VFLW and then duck across to Icon Park to see the VFL and just watch and just record the AFL game on your KO or your Foxtel or whatever, and go back and watch it later.
It's all about the VFL.
Festival of footy for North Melbourne fans.
It's a festival of football. Arden Street's just down the road. Why not? The AFL can take a back seat. We're all about the VFL and the VFLW, mate. It's certainly going to be an exciting day, and hopefully we see both teams light it up, as we mentioned with the captain there from the Kangaroos, Jess Jones. She'll get a chance to lead her team out and have a taste of maybe a little bit of success, but a nice competitive effort from the Roos up against the Pies.
Yeah, certainly look forward to it. They're a passionate bunch of supporters, the North Melbourne people, and they do get behind their VFL and VFLW teams. So we look forward to seeing plenty down at Arden Street on Saturday as well.
Big games on
three
Sunday,
big games.
mate.
Yeah, 3 big games on Sunday. And once again, it's the first look at football for all 6 teams. The Box Hill Hawks are taking on the Southern Saints. That's out at La Trobe University at Bundoora at 10 a.m. In a full-length game, 4 by 20 minutes. All these games are 4 by 20-minute quarters, except that North Collingwood one, which is 4 by 18. We're seeing Darebin for the first time. Actually, I did say 6. It's only 5 because Port Melbourne is fronting for their second game. Port Melbourne versus Darebin. That's at the Swinburne Centre at Punt Road Oval at 12 o'clock on Sunday. So Borough and Falcon fans can get down there and have a look at their teams. And then out at the NEC hangar, it is Essendon playing the Casey Demons first versus the preliminary finalists, the premiers and the preliminary finalists. They're also playing at 12 o'clock on Sunday out at the hangar. So we look forward to getting some results in from all those games to talk about next week.
Absolutely, mate. And make sure you join us here on VFL 23. Catch us on Spotify, Anchor, Amazon Music, and YouTube by jumping on and typing in VFL 23. Want to shout out to a couple of VFL fans up in the Queensland way, Mitchy Merritt, Dan Viles and Cam Smith for all their support. They've jumped on and showed their support across the week, which is what it's all about. As we turn our attention to the VFLW season, we're going to have a brief look at half the teams, Rhodesy, and I'll go through some notes and I'll get your follow-up. We're having a look at Box Hill. They've got a tough ask with Essendon and the Southern Saints in the first 3 weeks. How do you see their second season? Under their season under second-year coach Sherry O'Neill running up against the grand finalists in the first few weeks?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for them, isn't it? As I mentioned last week, you're not really sure how they're going to go now that they're I suppose effectively a reserves team, the VFLW team. Now that they've got a squad in the AFL, and the same question gets asked about Essendon, of course. But we find it out very early, don't we, with those early games against fellow finalists from last year, and they do, because they did finish in that top bracket of teams. They get a tougher fixture this year. In fact, the straight sets exit doesn't really help them a great deal, it doesn't really hurt them a great deal, I should say, because they do drop into that second bracket by finishing fourth. So that sort of helps them out a little bit. If I remember rightly, did I get that right? No, I'm the one that's got it wrong this time. They finished second, went out in straight sets and recorded third, fourth. I've completely confused myself now. Either way, they've got a tougher fixture than they had last year when they came out of the bottom 4 teams. So it's groups of 4, not groups of 3. So that's what's confusing me. That's why they're in the top bracket, the Box Hill Hawks. So they will have double up matches against Essendon, Southern Saints, and the Casey Demons this year, having finished in 4th spot on the ladder. Took me a while to get myself sorted out there.
It's a big pre-season. We've got a lot to digest and a lot to explore, because it's going to be a massive VFL and VFLW season. And to come out of the blocks with Box Hill, they had a tough year last year in terms of the finals, but we know they are good enough. And what we see from them this year in terms of developing players will help strengthen their team in the AFLW season in the back end of the year. So I think it's going to be an awesome opportunity for them. I think if you're a VFLW fan, you're going to be pretty excited, because you're going to be seeing some big hitting matches straight out of the gate, with the Hawks taking on the Bombers and the Saints the first few weeks. If that's going to give us any indication, we'll see some really big games. We'll get the finals early. We'll get the season essentially bookended by finals caliber games.
Exactly right, and some big names. They've managed to maintain most of their VFLW squad from last year. Brought in some good ones as well. You'll see some pretty handy players like Nick Garner, who's played over 50 games at VFLW level. She played in the AFLW. Abby Holmes is an AFLW premiership player. She's re-signed again for Box Hill. A lot of their young talent, Craelli McClendon, they're all back. The experienced Christy Stratton, Jess Trend hopefully has a good run after a couple of injury-interrupted seasons. Nadia von Berto as well has played some really good state league footy. So I don't think they're going to be dropping off too much, Box Hill. They'll be around the mark as they change their name, but nothing else really changes.
No, absolutely not. Their spirit doesn't change at all. Have a look at Carlton. We'll hope for its first finals appearance in the VFLW. They have a favourable draw this year and have 3 home games in the first month to mount its climb up the ladder under coach Tom Stafford. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they've lost the former AFLW player in Charlotte Hammonds. Apart from that, they have been extremely quiet with announcing signings and recruits and who's in and who's out and that sort of thing. But the signs are obviously good based on what we saw last week against Port Melbourne at the weekend with a 42-point win. Some of their big names obviously fronting up again, playing well. They're another club that has been tipped and touted highly over the last few years since they joined the VFLW, but are still to make the finals. So this is pretty much, well, you'd think it's time. They've got to make that next step, push into the finals, and not give away early games, because that's what they've done in the past, is lost games early and they haven't been able to play catch up. And by having that friendly fixture of home games at Icon Park early on, they've got a golden opportunity to do that. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll know by round 4 or 5 what we're going to see from Carlton this year. Absolutely.
The destiny's in their hands. If they can make the most of the start to the season with that draw, then their maiden VFLW finals appearance may not be too far away. Pete McCurlier leads Casey in his third season. Casey faced the reigning grand finals twice, but have the chance to finish strongly with 3 home games to close out the season, with the Bombers, Hawks and the Boroughs and a chance to mount some good momentum heading into finals, especially if they can knock off some of the big guns on the road to the finals season.
Yeah, well, that's it. They were the team that flew out of the blocks last year. I think they went to 9-0, 8-0, or 9-0 in the first half of the year. Mm-hmm. They didn't play. I think that they didn't play Essendon until later on in the year. They played them twice late and lost both times. They ended up finishing the season in third spot on the ladder, and that's where they ended up after they got through. They had a win over Collingwood in the first final, got through to the first semi where they tipped Hawthorn out in straight sets. They would be still disappointed that they weren't able to beat the Southern Saints in that prelim. They would have felt that they should have played in the grand final. So they'll be hungry to make amends for that. And as you said, with a strong finish to the season at home, albeit against good opposition, you would expect to see the Casey Demons right up there again, especially on the back of Melbourne's AFLW premiership a couple of months ago.
Absolutely right there, mate. Chloe McMillan leads Collingwood in her third season. They finished 6th last year and have a tough start to the year with matches against Port, Casey, Box Hill and Essendon, but they do have a favourable draw at the back end of the year.
And this is the team that I really do expect to fly back up the ladder, remembering they were premiers in 2019. They were undefeated in 2021 before the season got called off, slipped off the radar last year down to 6th and went out in the first final. But I fully believe that they're better than that. They were as good as they were on the back of defence. They barely conceded scores. If you scored 3 goals against Collingwood in a game when they were in their 2 really good seasons, you were in really good shape to potentially knock them off, because their challenge was scoring. And last year, that's what happened. Their challenge was still scoring, but they weren't able to restrict the opposition to a losing score. So I'm sure that the attention will be sent back onto the back line, and I expect Collingwood with the friendlier fixture, the middle tier fixture, I expect them to be right back at the pointy end this year.
We'll take a look at Darebin, who'll be coached by Kate Tyndall in her second season. They finished 8th last year. Focus will be matches against Collingwood, Box Hill and Essendon mid-season. That could make or break their run into the finals.
Definitely. They are another team that had a great season last year with no expectations at all. They won 5 of their first 7 games. I think they were sitting 3rd on the ladder at that stage. Unfortunately, they then lost their last 7 or 8 to drop right out to 8th spot. But Kate Tyndall, a legend of the club, she's shown she's got them on the right track. It was a hard fixture in those 7 or 8 games. They'll be back. They'll be a season better, a season more experienced, and I look forward to seeing them potentially pushing for a spot in the top 6.
Absolutely, and the 6 team we'll have a look at this week. A team that's close to my heart and the heart of many opposition teams, considering their dominance in season 2022. Essendon will be coached by first-time coach Travis Cloak, taking over from Brendan Major, what changes are we going to see to the list, especially on the back of an AFLW campaign and the 2022 Premiership? And keeping in mind too that you're taking out a Premiership coach and you're putting in a coach that hasn't coached anywhere before at this level.
At this level, yeah, that's true. He did coach Eastern Rangers last year in the NAB League, both the boys and the girls. Had solid years without turning on, but again, at NAB League at under 18s level, it's all about development and what's coming through. He will take on a very good team still. I'm sure they'll lose a few, but I've seen photos from their training, and there are still some excellent footballers running around at training there. The captain, Mia Clifford, is still there. Courtney Ugel's still running around there at training. They lose Georgia Nanscorn, unfortunately, to that knee injury in the VFLW Grand Final last year. That will be a massive loss for them. But, yeah, you can't see a team that went undefeated falling off too far. So the Bombers, I don't know if I'd make them Premiership favourites, but they're going to be right up there, and whichever teams beat them will be playing in the Grand Final, because I can't see them dropping any lower than third.
I'll be fascinated to see what happens with Travis taking over from Brendan. You're taking out a Premiership winning coach and putting in someone that's quite new and fresh to this competition. What that sort of does to change that dynamic, and as we've sort of experienced with the VFLW over last season into this season, we're seeing changes of new teams going into the AFLW competition, and what's going to happen with the list with the way the AFLW season has been positioned at the end of the year. Do we see players come out midway through the season? It's created an interesting proposition for a lot of teams as we start to look at teams preparing for the AFLW season.
Exactly right. That's the $64,000 question that we won't know the answer to until it happens. Only the clubs know what their strategy is going to be, and it's going to create all sorts of intrigue as the season goes on. And I, for one, can't wait to see how it unfolds. And I certainly hope that we do see the strongest teams possible still running around by the time the finals come.
Absolutely. And for those who are joining us for the first time, this is the only media platform of its kind where we've got the podcast and the video that covers the VFL and the VFLW to the extent that we've got. But we've got Rhodesy in Melbourne, who off-air mentioned that he'd been decked out in a hoodie, and you've got myself on the Gold Coast. I'm sweating bullets. It's summer. We haven't got that consistency. We've got 1,600 kilometres apart, and we've just got the cold and the hot, all extremes. Rhodesy, you prefer to be in my situation, mate. I would love to put a jumper on right now. I'm not going to lie.
We might have to swap. We might be able to do it in person next week, Yandy. I'm heading up to Queensland on Sunday, so I'm going to enjoy some of your sun.
Oh, excellent, mate. I've got a bit of a history, though, I will say, with friends and family coming up, but they often bring the rain with them. So let's hope that you don't jinx it and keep that run going. But we do appreciate everyone with their support, jumping on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube and Anchor. Rhodesy, it is an absolute pleasure, and the support continues to grow for what we do as we try and create something that engages with our VFL and VFLW community in a way that probably hasn't been done before, and it's a pretty exciting time, particularly during the practice match season, to get an idea of where teams are positioned heading into the season openers.
And it's something we certainly love bringing to you, and we definitely hope that you're enjoying listening to it and watching it as much as we're enjoying putting it together and just talking about the footy.
Absolutely. Well, this is VFL 23. Thank you so much for your company. We look forward to catching up with you all next week.